Hello, good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain. So,
good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Makinde.
From the nation's capital, good morning. I'm Maupe Ogunyese from Abuja.
Do you really have to rub it in all the time? Well, this is a capital as well. And incidentally, Lagos and Abuja have the biggest, the busiest airports in the country.
Yep.
And but you know, a number of people will always reference the experiences they have, you know, using the airports. That's talking about all of the corruption allegations and all of that. There are those who have the occasion. I think, you know, there have been experiences. A number of people would also always reference the fact that, you know, it would seem like there is some special credence or special recognition given to certain people who are not allowed to use, you know, all these such parameters, you know, at the airport and things like that. Of course, the FAA is speaking about that one, declaring that any public or private sector official at the airport found to be involved in whatever form of corrupt practice would lose his or her on-duty card permanently. But then, have there been investigations concerning the allegations? Has any official been brought to book? Don't we have security cameras at the airports that are able to look at the officials doing these things and be able to say, okay, this is the issue, okay, let's deal with it and stuff like that? And to the point that we have to be, it's foreign nationals that come to the country and make videos or, you know, comments online and literally embarrass 200 million people in the population. I think it is a very, very embarrassing thing.
You know, I don't know if you answered your question, but Mark, just a minute. Maybe we should listen to that before we just make some further comments on what's going on.
All the airports will have meetings with their airport teams and the HODs. After the meeting with the HODs, they will meet with their stakeholders, namely the agencies and then the other private stakeholders. And this is primarily to inform them that henceforth, all violations, any and all violations recorded or caught, fine will escalate, not necessarily within the airport anymore. We will write to the department at the airport, we will write to the agency or companies on headquarters to inform them, and the violator will lose his ODC. The ODC is on the on-duty card, which means you lose your access card into the terminal. And we agreed it will be permanent. Once you lose your ODC at the Nigerian airport now, henceforth, you will not get it back. If you are from a private company, you apply or let them get a new staff. This is an agency, you have to get another personnel. When you lose your on-duty card, you lose your privilege or your right to come into the terminal permanently. No more access to a fan airport. Secondly, we added that all personnel working in the airport, private or government, you must have your name boldly written on your front, the front of your jacket or your uniform. And FAN will make sure that we'll go around now and check around to see if the names are written in very tiny letters. We will write to the agencies or the companies to make it bolder for ease of visibility. So all stakeholders, when I say stakeholder, it means agencies, private, and all stakeholders, that's the terminology. All stakeholders must have their names prominently written on their shirts within our terminal or within our facilities. If you are caught with your name not written, it's another violation. You might lose your ODC.
Well, I do not know what ODC is, but I see very clearly there the special advisor to the president on ease of doing business, Jumoke Oduwole, sitting right beside him whilst making that announcement. And I think that, you know, for them, it has been their biggest headache. The fact that, you know, the presidency is trying its best to make Nigeria one of the destinations, you know, where business is easy to do. But it would seem that consistently there have been efforts to undermine whatever efforts that they have been able to make. I also see that she was able to speak at that particular conference. But just the very fact that she's sitting right there, you know, presses home where this is coming from. The fact that those videos that have recently gone viral have not escaped their notice, and how, you know, people are certainly not happy about what the experience has been coming to Nigeria, especially foreign nationals, for things to have degenerated so low, especially since COVID, that is now so blatant and so obvious. And these acts of corruption are now done in the open. Does make one really, really worry as to what is going on. Will the officials say that they're not aware? I doubt very strongly that anyone can say that. Are we going to justify to say, okay, it's because of so and so and so? I don't think that under the circumstances, that's sort of the manner in which we've gone about conducting our business at the airport can be justified, especially when you look at what has happened. And yes, we know that, minimum wage no longer does anything. Your salary no longer takes you home. And really, we need to be very realistic about the needs of the country. Just look at what we spoke about yesterday. Cooking gas has doubled in the the price of cooking gas has doubled over the last 3 months or so. Yes, it is true. But when we think about the fact that this is the impression, this is the image of our country we're talking about, this is the very first impression anyone coming to our country for the very first time will have of about 200 million people. I think that, what we just heard from the fan official who made this announcement, we hope that they follow up with action. And we hope it's not something that will happen for a month or two, and afterwards, it's back to business as usual. Even when journalists who are supposed to be chronicling these things, when they see these things happen, sometimes you just... You have to ask, whether or not we can actually feign ignorance, that we do not know that this is still the order of the day. But it's good to see that, they did not ignore the videos. I do recall that recently, I think it was Zeddy Trust that alleged that customs officials were setting up, illegal road checkpoints. And the response was, bring proof. In this instance, there is proof. We've seen a few of the videos, and I'm glad that, to those whom it has concerned, they have not ignored the proof that corruption is indeed blatant and alive and well at our airports. Let us hope that something will be done about this, as it is being done, that, it will not just be words, but it will be followed up with severe sanctions. Gentlemen.
Well, I'm not going to hold my breath, for some of these things, because it may, as you've said, may just be sound bites at the end of the day. We'll go back the months. We see these things. And the VIPs, do they use that airport? But they don't use those areas where these things happen, which was chronicled. And so maybe that's why when you talk about, is it FAN, who many of them are failing in their responsibility? Is it NCA, the same thing? Because when you go through the airport, those you see at the front line, goodness, well, that even happens to be a tip of the iceberg in terms of what people go through when you have to go through those areas. We've been there several times, where even when they see some Caucasians, they allow them go through without even observing some of the protocols. And then when you're coming through, they ask you, no, please go back and do this. And I had, one time, I had to ask, wait a minute. So why didn't those two people do the same thing? Why are you asking me to do this? And they didn't. He said, well, they are diplomats. Oh, excuse me, diplo what? So look, it's just really sad and unfortunate. So we're hoping that
I think two issues that Malcolm raised there. Yeah. Number one, the officials. How well paid are they? That's an invitation to
but it's an excuse.
It is not an excuse. It is not an excuse. How well paid are they? That's number one. Number two, the processes of FAN and the processes of the people who work at the airports, the processes of monitoring their activities, how efficient is that?
Don't they have CCTV there all this while? Okay. Will they say they haven't seen it? The FAN and NCA officials, can they claim not to have seen it? Even right from when you try to park your car at the airport, the services charges go up, but the services are the same, time and again. Is it from the toll at the airport? So look, it's just a lot, really.
Well, but it is.
We hope that at the end of the day, maybe they'll need more of those videos, such that they can sit up. I think it's welcome.
The fact that is even being tied to the ease of doing business is very, very, very crucial. Very crucial.
Well, there's no ease in doing business in those kind of scenarios, I tell you. So we'll start with Vanguard newspaper as we go through some of the dailies here today. Well, Vanguard leads with Anambra, it's Soludo. So I think they didn't put to bed early. So So you can see that informs this headline here. Records landslide victory in Ihiala supplementary poll. Gunmen engage joint security operatives in a shootout at Ihiala. IPOB denies involvement in a gun deal with security forces. IPOB didn't clash with security forces at Dinuba. We don't know of any killing in Ihiala ascribed to the police. And then you see Ume denied entry at Ihiala LGA Secretariat. So that's the big lead on the front page. And you see the Anambra Governorship poll result tab on the front page as well. Okay. Yeah, I know what will happen. So the addition there, perhaps, as you can see, not the same one in terms of the pictures that the version we've got here. So, but yes, essentially the same lead on the front page. So, third mainland bridge is safe. Government. Remember that hoopla that was circulated as to what to do, how to proceed, being cautious about some of these things. They've spoken up about it. Don't forget to take a look at what's on the back page, sports lovers. Osimhen gets Eagles #9 jersey ahead Igalo. So there you go. That's Vanguard today.
Okay. Again, you miss out our favorite. Let me pardon you for today. The Nigerian Tribune is next, and it talks about the Electoral Act, though election related. NAS adopts direct primary, APC governors, PDP kick. What does that mean? Find the story on page 2. President to get bail within 7 days. That's one of the writers. Others, APC's tripartite committee meeting ends in deadlock. Governors push final decision to Buhari. How Osinbajo managed tension. All of that packed on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. So many other stories. Right under the picture you see there, roadside vulcanizer gives information on potential victims. Kidnapper reveals. How does, wow, that's narrates how he got 1.4 million naira from 3 kidnapping incidents in Ekiti. Wow. That story is on page 26. That's intelligence right there, isn't it? Markwe.
Well, let's take a look at what The Guardian has for you this morning. Look at what they have. NAS snubs APC governors. So direct to the people who are actually complaining. Passes electoral bill with direct primaries. INEC to determine results transmission mode. Direct primaries now mandatory for political parties. Lawmakers to transmit electoral bill to Buhari within 7 days. APC governors oppose direct primary. May truncate presidential assent. Direct primaries will overstretch INEC, says PGF chairman. The INEC complain first now. PDP, no party has right to impose its processes on another. Okay, so it would seem that this complaint is all around in the major political parties. Well, you might want to read details on page 2. And look how boldly they carry that story. Anambra Guba, INEC declares Soludo winner. The story is on page 2 of the paper. I think it should be another story. Long road to, is it a victory now for Soludo? I mean, when you think of how many times he's contested or attempted to contest in the Anambra governorship elections, and it's just at this attempt that it's finally worked for him. Or look at what's at the bottom, a few other stories there. Candidate to appear in court today for treason trial as IPOB declares it at home. That story is also on page 7 of the paper. They have a few other stories, but let's leave it there for The Guardian.
New Telegraph next then. Electoral Act. Senate passes conference committee report. So, different phrases have been used to describe what was passed. At some point, it was referred to as a harmonized Electoral Amendment Act. At some point, they talked about the conference committee report. But we'll get the gentleman to shed light on some of these things as we progress. So you need to keep it locked here. But look at the writers. Retains direct primary for political parties. INEC to determine poll results transmission mode. Buhari to get bill Tuesday as reps endorse direct primary. You can't impose direct primary on us, PDP. So see the back and forth about some of these things. And it turns out that not just the PDP, but I guess I'm going to get ahead of myself now. Look at what's at the bottom straight. Allocation, LGs to receive more as FG increases share by 3.13%. Then the rider reads, FG states to shed 3.04%. Yeah, shed. S-H-E-D, as opposed to, or you know when you say share, isn't it? So
okay.
This time it's shedding.
Well, where's it going to go to?
The devil is in the detail. I like people to always read between the line and understand some of those. That's a New Telegraph today.
Leadership this morning has Electoral Act Amendment Bill. That's what they're also focusing on, along with other papers. APC, PDP kick as National Assembly approves direct primaries. Stories on page 4. But aren't they the ones in the National Assembly? Aren't they the ones that made the law?
As to why they're kicking?
Yeah.
Well, remember what we say. This game, it's about interests. You could be in the same party and have different interests. The projections, that's how it works. I'm
really at a loss.
Why?
The National Assembly is populated by APC and PDP, largely.
Tick.
So, and the National Assembly is the one that made this law.
So to speak. Tick, well. Yeah. I mean, I would dress so to speak, but tick.
Why disagree as a political party when you've made the decisions together in the National Assembly?
Now that's the part that we're going to find out in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
To progress.
Lawmakers, okay, electronic transmission of election results, use of technology, find the story on page 4. Several others right under the nameplate, and then this might be interesting. FG states to combat hunger with, quote, Operation Feed Yourself.
I thought you were going to write almost immediately about Operation Feed the Nation at the time and what became of it.
This is what you have on the front page. Well, the details you'll find on the inside pages. And I think it is also something worth
Operation Feed Yourself.
What does it mean? What does that mean? Okay, the details you'll find on the inside pages. Markwe?
Well, I certainly look forward to that one. I mean, when you think of how many houses, I mean, there are in the Federal Capital Territory, you have to ask how many of them have garden patches, for instance. I mean, before it was almost normal for almost every home to have a garden patch where you grow a few vegetables, at least the one you can easily use in your kitchen. Maybe you own a few chickens, might be roaming around your compound, as the case might be, you know. Nowadays, we're very, very worried about the aesthetics. Is it that, you know, food gardens don't work for aesthetics and compounds? I don't know. It might be something I would want to interrogate, but I do not know what the details of Operation Feed Yourself is. But I think if there's anything that Corona pressed home, it's the fact that we need to take, you know, farming, even just for self-sufficiency, a little more seriously. Give it a little more thought. Take a look at Daily Trust newspaper, and they're focusing very heavily on the Federal Capital Territory this morning, where I live and move and have my being. Residents decry rot in FCT as reps summon minister. Legislators frown at poor waste management, say Abuja terribly unsafe. Chide bellow over non-appointment of mandate secretaries. So sometimes you really have to read between the lines. Now, much as, yes, the minister does have his own, you know, it's not perfect, and I'm sure that, you know, he's doing very well in certain areas, and other areas, you know, he certainly deserves knocks. But you have to ask sometimes, when these things are raised, are they raised from the point of wanting the FCT to be better, or they're raised from a political point of view? Page 5 might give you details into what precisely is happening. They have pictures to support what they're talking about. I mean, the rot in the FCT, but I guess the minister needs to speak. I don't know that he's granted any interviews. So far, so good. I mean, how many years has been minister? But we'll wait and see. Bandits kill 7 policemen in Zamfara. That story is on page 8. And Anambra Governorship, Soludo maintains lead as INEC collates Ihiala's results. Well, I think that events have overtaken that particular headline. But Let's leave it there for Daily Trust newspapers.
The Independent, yeah, do we have that? Well, there's still a couple, but there's also News Direct, so depends on which one comes first, guys. Okay, there you go. So Daily Independent lead with Nigeria spends 31.2 billion naira yearly on coconut importation. Yeah. Stakeholders say 32 coconut states can generate 1.92 trillion naira annually. Yeah, but they also have the Anambra governorship poll. INEC declares Soludo the winner, as well as NAS OK's direct primaries, e-transmission of poll results, which has been highlighted by several others. That's Daily Independent today.
News Direct has direct primary. APC tripartite committee faults NAS over passage of electoral bill, wants Buhari to withhold presidential assent. That's interesting. APC cannot impose its processes on PDP. Kola Ologbondiyan says, find that among several other stories on the front page this morning. And there's the Daily Times, which is of course also talking about the Electoral Act amendments. Finally, NAS OK's e-transmission of results and direct primaries. Right above the nameplate, Anambra Cuba poll, INEC declares Soludo winner. Okay, so another party that made it, a paper that made it, and several others on the front page. All
right, so there you go. That wraps it up with a look at some of the dailies here today. We will be back in a moment. So, yeah, the direct primaries, the Anambra elections, all coming up. Stay with us.
Well, that's precisely what we're delving into this morning. It would seem that oftentimes when we speak of the Electoral Act, there's usually one focus or the other. And that's because of where the interests will eventually lie. When it came up for amendment, one of the biggest controversies that trailed the amendment of the Electoral Act was electronic transmission, e-transmission. In the House of Reps, they passed something that said INEC could determine, and that was after big major controversy, and they had to invite the NCC to come and give them a briefing. They eventually said that INEC could determine however it wanted to transmit the results. In the Senate, it was a different kettle of fish. Now, it would seem that they've had a review of that, they've had a rethink, and they've decided to pass precisely what the House of Reps has passed. But another bone of contention, it would seem, has come up, and this is about the way political parties conduct their primaries. Now, to speak on the passage of the Electoral Act and the joint passing the harmonized version by both chambers of the National Assembly, we have with us Honorable Nkem Abonta, who is the former chairman, House Committee on Public Affairs, Public Petition, beg your pardon. He's still currently a member of the House of Representatives from Abia State. Honorable, you're welcome to Sunrise Today this morning.
Good morning, viewers.
Well, I don't know why I'm in love with the term a long road to, because I was talking about Soludo's road to victory, and I said it's been a long road to victory. It's a long walk to freedom from Nelson Mandela's book. But it would seem that this Electoral Act amendment has also had its own fair share of ups and downs, but finally it's been passed. The National Assembly has been able to arrive at a harmonized version. How difficult was the path to eventually getting what it was that we got?
Oh, thank you very much. I don't even think we have gotten to the path right now, because I pray that Mr. President signs the bill.
Indeed, we wait for Mr. President's assent, but the National Assembly, even for them to achieve a consensus, it wasn't an easy road, was it?
No, it wasn't. A lot of lobbying and horse trading and maneuvers. It was very difficult. People had different interests, and people tried to put personal interest in the laws they were writing, which is not necessary. You don't write a law for today. You write a law that will translate the totality of years. You don't do a thing for a particular person, for a particular group of persons, and so on. So that all that played in the electoral law. But eventually, it came to be.
So from what we have now, would you be saying that the Electoral Act that we have passed is something that would serve us not just today, but this Electoral Act has also looked into the future? Is this something you can thump your chest to say?
I will authoritatively say so, but no law is perfect.
Indeed.
Even the God's law is not that perfect. But it will now have something that, if practiced, will be better than where we're coming from. If practiced very, very well, will address certain issues in the future. Of course, we looked at what the issues in the past and tried to bring it forward to cure it. That's what we did exactly.
For you, what were the most significant changes that this electoral act has that makes you at least satisfied that you are part of this?
Of course, strengthening the electoral process, like the electronic transactions or transmission, is very, very critical. And then also putting things on INEC that made them mandatory to do.
For instance?
Another topical one now is the direct primaries. That seems to be tearing the parties and the governors and the legislators apart. But we also looked at what was in the past and then tried to bring it to present, to focus. In the past, most parties used what they call delegate election. IPC recently also used direct primaries. I don't just know why some people are now crying they don't want it again. I think Buhari came into power through direct primaries. And the governors didn't complain. They all supported that. They went to Lagos and did all whatnot. I think some persons are also clamoring to repeat such issue again, while some say they don't want that. But in totality of it, ordinarily, parties are meant to look at whichever way. And the House also deemed it fit. Some persons in the National Assembly deemed it fit to retrieve power back to the people, to restore power back to the people, to do what they called inclusive participation, where people would directly decide whom they want. It's not cumbersome though, but for every method you want to take, will have the advantage and disadvantage. So we've tried mainly this, so we deemed it fit to also try another thing, so that people will feel they are part of the process.
It's always been left to the decision of the political parties. Why does National Assembly feel that it's imperative that it be put in the Electoral Act, that the manner in which political parties conduct their primaries be direct?
One, we all know that the process in most cases is being hijacked. You also know that some persons call the shot when it is delegate election. We also know that it is easy for some people to seize it. In the past, I can tell you that somebody would just pick up all the delegates, put them in one hotel, and drive them to the venue. It's also a legal process. But National Assembly, some members deemed it fit to return power to the masses. Some members deemed it fit to make it participatory democracy. Say, Kai, let people nominate directly. And that is what is bringing this problem. I also know that some governors in all the major parties are saying, particularly APC, PDP, are saying no, let's go back to delegate election. But let them give us justification why it must be delegate election.
Okay, let me quickly, before I take this further now, I know that my colleagues in Lagos have a few questions for you, but just before I bring in my colleague from Lagos, let me quickly introduce our second guest, the Honorable Benjamin Kalu, who's the Chairman House Committee on Media and also a member of the All Progressives Congress. Honorable, you're welcome to Sunrise Elite this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let me quickly send this to Lagos then. Chamberlain, over to you.
Well, yeah, Honorable Abonta, when you started out, you talked about you don't make laws for today, and then you said you don't make laws for a particular person. Could you shed light? Well, what does that mean? Are you suggesting that this particular direct primaries was made for a particular person for now, or what?
Of course, you know that interest will always play out in things like this. If you go back to history and look at how presidents had come out, particularly the present ruling parties, you may appreciate what I'm saying. In the past, governors specifically will have a greater role to decide who, to regulate the delegates, to direct the delegates. But how will you now direct the masses? And I'm saying that laws should be made futuristic. Laws should be made to address problems, not to favor one person, not to anticipate what will be. In actual sense, what we did was anticipation of what some persons want. But like I said, some members in the House and the Senate deemed it fit to take away these powers from where it had been domiciled before to the masses, so they can, if you are not popular, you will win.
Who are these persons that you say that this is what some people want?
What I mean that in the past, some certain persons decide who comes to House in states. Right now, let me give you an example. In the Senate, there are senators who don't know their ward chairman. In the Senate, there are senators who don't know their officers from the ward. Their officers had been programmed by powers to be. And they felt the only way to come back will be to return the power to the masses. So right now, the ward chairman, those ward delegates are no longer necessary. For those who manipulated the system and have them as structures, we will use them now. That structure will collapse because the power, if assigned or assented to, will return to the masses.
But I'm pretty sure that my colleague is not going to let you go on that yet, Honorable Abonta. But let me quickly ask Honorable Kalu this question. I mean, it came to me, I mean, when we were looking at the first segment of the program, where we say that the major political parties, APT and PDP, are not completely happy with the decision of the National Assembly. And my question is, the APC and the PDP literally populate the National Assembly. How come the parties are disagreeing with the position of members of the party from the National Assembly?
Thank you very much. I don't want to accept that PDP and APC, they are not happy with the position of the parliament. It's also important to note that we don't make laws for APC and PDP. We make laws for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The judiciary cures the gap in the society through the court. The executives cure the gap through implementation of projects and all the rest of them. We cure the gaps in the society through legislative intervention. We have over the years seen the gap within our democratic climb, and there is nothing else left for us to do than to take the bull by the horn and make sure we demystify this almighty electoral act that has failed in various assemblies. And the question is, what are the ingredients of this particular electoral act that has impressed a lot of Nigerians beyond the colors of party? You're looking at the electronic transmission, which my senior colleague here have, discussed on, and you're also looking at the almighty direct or indirect primaries. To discuss that is to begin to look at the benefits of these direct primaries. What does it do to Nigerians, do for Nigerians?
But Honorable Kalu,
centralizes the selection.
Well, when you say you don't make laws for political parties, and you're trying to give the impression that this was done for Nigerians, about the electronic voting, transmission of results, possibly, yeah, because that was what a lot of people wanted. But the National Assembly then descended and made laws for political parties, direct primaries. Those are not regular scenarios. Those are party affairs. And that's why members of the parties are kicking, saying, no, you don't do that for us. Let the parties decide. That is not in the place of the National Assembly to make laws for those parties. The parties can always do that.
The political parties are not supreme. to the legislative arm of government. Once we make laws from the parliament, the parties are obliged to submit themselves to the laws made to create the parameters of the operation. It's not the other way around. And remember, in course of making laws, a lot of things come into place. The whole 9 years of making the laws, they were kept there to enable the people who are representing various constituencies to consider the pros and the cons of going in a particular direction. And that was what I was about highlighting, which goes beyond the colors of the party. Political parties are platforms that are supposed to be there to strengthen the institution of democracy. But we are the fulcrum of our democracy, the legislative arm. We know what is best for our democracy. We are the backbone. If you remove the legislative arm, the democracy will collapse. And we have seen the benefits of direct primaries. And that is why we are putting it in our laws to guide the various political parties on the parameters of their operation, to enable us advance our democracy from where it is to where it ought to be, even if not completely, at least quite closer to what it ought to be. And
just one second.
Leadership that everybody complains about in the country. Just
1 second, Honorable Khan, if you don't mind me butting in. Just 1 second. I understand. I'm sorry. One of the things that I understand that the political parties are supposed to do is to come up with policies for national development. And I'm just wondering how come the National Assembly, which is populated mostly by APC members, is not in agreement with the position of the APC, because if the governors, even the APC governors, are kicking against this, it sounds to me like the policy that APC as a party has is different from this move that the National Assembly, the Electoral Act that the National Assembly has passed is moving.
I don't understand why you should be very concerned about what an arm of government feels about the exercise of our constitutional mandate. The doctrine of separation of power is clear on who does what. The governors you refer to are part of the executive. We don't interfere in their exercise of duty. We, as parliamentarians, have made law for the Federal Republic of Nigeria to advance our democracy. It's not all laws that will go down well with a lot of people, but that doesn't make it a bad law. It is a law that is not self-serving. It's a law that will take us closer, like I said, to becoming an advanced democratic institution, nation. So when people complain about it, I don't know where they are gathering their facts from. We are in a meeting yesterday. When you say APC is now fighting against this. We had a tripartite meeting, and the leadership of the National Assembly, the President of the Senate, took his time to adumbrate on the importance of not taking for granted the peace that we are enjoying in the party at the moment and the successes we have achieved. And it is because people are carried along, the stakeholders are carried along in the decision process. And the tripartite meeting is a platform for us to do a review and appraisal of what we do as the ruling party, to be able to fine-tune areas that appear to be dusty. And if there is any reason for us to have a review during the appraisal, we usually present our cases. And I saw that the chairman of the party presented his case, and also the vice president presented, to clear, not to take any position, but to say we need to look at this again. And the president of the Senate made his strong point, and the leader of the Speaker of the House of Representatives took time to educate us, all of us, on why this is the best for the nation. And some of the things he mentioned was the decentralization of the selection process, and also the breaking of the hegemony that has existed, that has captured the nomination process of candidates in the various parties, and the need for us to break it. He also highlighted that this will help political party development, because political parties now will be compelled to maintain, sustain, reliable, verifiable, updated membership register. that will be, open and accessible, not to a few, a handful of people, but to the members of the party as well as the aspirants. That is healthy for our party. He also highlighted that the probability will now be high or higher for women and youths to participate in elections, not being afraid of maybe godfathers and all the rest of them, but by going to mobilize the grassroots to support them. And this is a legacy that this Ninth Assembly want to leave. So, and he also, finally, he also highlighted the democratic
I'm afraid I have to cut you. I'm afraid that I have to cut you. I mean, you can list all of the, what they call that now, the advantages of this, but we also know that it's not exactly a perfect system. No, and that it could be cumbersome. There'll be questions as to how you intend to achieve this. We saw how it was that the APC in the past did try to, say that direct primaries was the only way that, its candidates were going to emerge, and somehow they had to, I don't know what made them compromise, but they eventually had to, shift a little, so to speak. I'm just wondering, since both of you are on the same page, even you're both members of the House of Reps, even though you are from different political parties, the governors in your own party too, Mr. Abanta, they're also kicking against this. How is this? Because they believe that this is something that is happening within the APC and is supposed to solve a problem within the APC, and it would seem that they're trying to impose it on the PDP as well through the passage, the passage in the Electoral Act. I don't know whether you've listened to any rumblings or any murmurings from your party. How has it been accepted there as well?
To the best of my knowledge, I do not think that the governors in my party took it lightly, the issue of direct primaries. Reason being that, like I said earlier, governors had in the past, even now, called the shots. If you do direct primaries, even though cumbersome, could be tricky, it means no single person, not the president, not the governor, could decide what happened. You can't take the whole of my community now, quarantine in one hotel to come and vote. You need the whole a stadium or that kind of thing. So I do not think they want it. For reasons they do fine, I don't know. But I know that I came to delegate election. I would have preferred delegate election. That would be easier for me to manage. But some persons, like I said, thought about it and said, "Kai, let's take away these powers and domicile with the persons." You see, lobbying is allowed. If that constitution had not happened yesterday, probably today, there will be a different opinion. So, if you look at what happened at the flood house, that report was laid down that day and considered that day out of the normal procedural things we do. Because lobbying is on and is allowed. You talk to people. So, the speed that it was hurriedly done shows that there was an attempt to beat some certain things. Of course, like my colleague said, they came out from the tripartite meeting where that was discussed extensively. That discussion, to my mind, as an opposition party, is to change what would have been. So, the constitution yesterday was that math to give a fait accompli to that tripartite method. I have done it, we've passed it, what can we do? So I would also suggest, let's practice it for a while and see what it will look like. I know law is cast on iron. If it's an iron, you can also melt it with superior fire point. So let's try this time and see what will be.
Well, let us see. I mean, as you rightly pointed out, let us wait and see whether or not it will be a sin, because it still has one more hurdle to cross.
That was a long wait. I say no, we've not even come to it because we now have the finishing.
You think that's the highest hurdle it has to cross? How optimistic are you, Honorable Kalu, about what is going to happen when this is eventually transmitted to the presidency, considering the fact that the big guns in your party were holding a meeting with the vice president? Do you think that they will be able to prevail on the president to sign this bill into law as passed?
First of all, I would like to clear what my senior colleague just said about hurriedly passing a piece of legislation. It was not hurriedly done because of anything that happened yesterday. Some of us were not even aware that that meeting was coming up. It was an emergency meeting, and you know the timetable for the next election is drawing closer, and the need to tidy up the Electoral Act, you know, cannot be overemphasized.
So you cannot dismiss the fact that, you cannot dismiss, you know, insinuations that that was also to reduce the pressure, to remove the pressure entirely from the National Assembly.
That's an assumption. An assumption.
I'm just saying you cannot dismiss the insinuation.
Yeah, it's an insinuation, like you describe it. It's an insinuation. It's an assumption. It's not a fact. The fact is that we are considering that time is drawing close, and we need to tidy up the Electoral Act. Now, back to your question: would somebody or a group of people, you know, influence Mr. President? Do you remember Mr. President's once saying, "I don't belong to anybody. I belong to everybody"? That statement, anybody there, means a handful of people, a pocket of people. And the everybody means the people themselves. And that is a true definition of democracy. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. In that definition, government appeared once, the people appeared 3 times. And Mr. President, if you followed him, you know, the Talakawa approach that he used is about the people. He's in support of us returning the party to the people, where the people will take the center stage to be able to define, you know, what is their needs and who has the right energy to suit their needs. So I am very sure that Mr. President will leave a good legacy when this is transmitted to him. I don't think Mr. President is going to do this against the democracy that he is trying to build, you know, in Nigeria. He's not going to listen to a pocketful against the entire
pocketful. The governors are not just, yes, there might be just 36 of them, but they're an extremely powerful pocketful.
Yeah, but they are not the people.
Very influential pocket.
They are very influential, but they are not the people. And what should democracy consider? The people, the generality of the people's interest, or the interest of a few.
Are you saying that the governors are against the people?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Are you saying they do not?
I am saying that
I'm
saying that your suggestion that the governors will go against the people is also an assumption. Because you are saying the governors are against this people-oriented piece of legislation. Therefore, they are going to meet. They are going to meet. They are going to meet the president.
We have seen your party kick against it by convening this emergency meeting. You called it. At whose prompting did these meetings happen? Did it happen at the promptings of the people?
Who? When you say the party kicking against it, the leadership of the parliament stood by their decision. I didn't see anybody speaking against it except clearing the fact that we need to do a review. Is it the best for us? Is it not the best for us? That was what I saw in that meeting.
We say that the National Assembly has played this, you know, tried to be smart about this, because oftentimes there has been a battle. We are aware of that. Sometimes a tussle between members of the National Assembly and the governors of their state. Isn't that correct?
Of course, you wouldn't expect the executive and the legislature to have a seamless relationship in all situations. So that will always be.
Isn't this wielding the big stick and hiding behind the people, so to speak? Isn't that what has happened with the passage of this piece of legislation?
Not at all. What he said when he started was that the law is not meant for a few. It's meant for the interests of the generality of the people. To personalize it will be a wrong analogy.
We'll take a break at this point, and I'll let Mr. Honorable Abonta, you know, wade into the discussion when we come back. Please stay with us. Well, we still have with us Honorable Nkem Bonta and also Honorable Benjamin Kalu, who are both members of the House of Representatives, and we're discussing the passage of the Electoral Act, Electoral Amendment Bill. Well, it's an act. It's just been amended. Let me quickly come to you, Honorable Bonta. So I was just speaking about this tussle, this quiet tussle, it was seen between the governors and members of the National Assembly, and how it was seen at the Pasadena, that simple clause about direct primaries was members of the National Assembly wielding a big stick against the governors, holding an ace of some sort. You do not agree?
Why not? That's the reality. Let me also tell you, you see, in the past, our present is assented to, members rely on the mercy, the pity of the states who control the delegates to bring them. So using legislative instrument now, they tried, it's like a revolution against some certain person, to take away.
Against who?
Against, of course, against the powers that control the delegates. To take it out from them and domicile with the masses. And I said that was wholly passed because of lobbying. And I'll prove my point. The tripartite meeting discussed, 70% of discussion there centered on direct primaries.
We were not there.
Well, we are getting the news and even the papers. They even objected to it. The outcome, waiting on Mr. President's final say.
You were not there.
Now, of course, I don't need to be there, but the paper informed us. Even the television channel also told us now.
They were not there.
Now, for the first time, yesterday, members saw that bill laid down. We ought to have 24 hours looked at it. What I say, tandem with what had done, but it was considered. 2 hours of laying it, we considered that volume to pass it. Of course, we did. So that every other person lobbying now say, oh, but the House, we've finished it. It's waiting for assent, transmission and assent. So as I say hurriedly, if you had tarried for another 72 hours, there will be lobbying.
So this is not necessarily, Honorable, would it be fair to say that this is not necessarily about the people, but about the interests of members of the National Assembly?
It's of the people, not interest of the National Assembly. Even the National Assembly may benefit by not being subjected to the horse trading and dictations and caprices and whims of some persons. Now, the people will be at liberty to decide who is, like my brother said, strong enough to carry their cross.
Are you optimistic that the president will sign this into law?
I am doubtful, but I pray he should. Why I say I'm doubtful is, at the helm of affairs of the tripartite party, of the ruling party, it didn't go down well. They didn't come to a conclusion. That shows the confusion. Will they not continue the influence to say, Mr. President, if the file will get to Mr. President? I pray, and if they don't get the file to him, I will urge National Assembly to veto it.
Is this something that National Assembly will consider, Honorable Kalu?
First of all, most of the line of discussion by my senior colleague, they are just, like I always say, assumption. He was not there. That's what they call participatory observation. And not
well, at least he was in the House when this thing was
no, that is different. But to refer to a tripartite meeting and to speak with such audacity, we don't attach credibility to such analogy because he was not there. I was there, and I can tell you what he's discussing and the way he's presenting it wasn't what happened. Well, back to what happened in the House. He was in the House, yes. I maintain that in view of the calendar of our elections, we needed to handle this piece of legislation quickly because it wasn't the entire legislation. It was harmonization. It was a conference committee report, which the Senate has already adopted. And there is nothing else to be done on this. You have gone to conference, you've canvassed your opinion by the people you delegated to go and represent your interests at the conference committee. We have delegated powers to them, and they sat with the Senate and agreed on the report. The same report that was presented before the Senate was the same and adopted was the same report that was presented to the House of Rep, and we also adopted it. Now, going forward to say whether we are optimistic, whether the president will sign it, yes, I'm optimistic because he wants to strengthen the democracy, he will sign it. But if he doesn't sign it, are we open to the constitutional provision of vetoing his position on this particular piece of legislation? When we get to that bridge, we will cross it. As it is at the moment, the National Assembly clerk will transmit it to the president, and we are very optimistic Mr. President will append his signature. But if he doesn't, when we get to that bridge, I'm sure we will cross it.
Dare I say that your response was already foretold about when you get to the bridge, you will cross it. But let us see how matters eventually pan out. We have to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on Sunrise Early this morning and sharing your thoughts on the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, which is now being passed and is awaiting transmission to the President. We understand that this will be done within 7 days.
Yeah.
But we have been speaking with Honorable Nkem Abonta, who is the former Chairman, House Committee on Public Petition, is a member of the People's Democratic Party, and Honorable Benjamin Kalu, who is the Chairman, House Committee on Media, and a member of the All Progressives Congress. Both of them agreed on why the Electoral Act Amendment Bill was passed in the manner it was, and agreed on the merits of the bill. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on Sunrise this morning.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Well, we'll take a break at this point. We'll be getting new perspectives on Anambra. Don't forget Anambra. And, of course, also on the Electoral Act Amendment Bill as currently passed. Please stay with us.
Four, that Charles Chukwuma Soludo of APGA, having satisfied the requirements of the law, is hereby declared the winner and is returned elected. Wow. This is dated today, 10th November 2021, and is signed by me, the returning officer. Thank you very much and good night.
Well, she's allowed some slack after such a long, several long hours, keeping up and then seeing that through. Well, yes, now we're joined by Mr. Robert Temukbero, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, just before we get on to that Anambra poll, what was focused on in the opening sequence, which Mark did take on with the honorable gentleman in the House of Reps about this bill that was signed by the House and the National Assembly and the Senate. The way it came across, it was a little confusing initially. There were those who used the term Harmonized Electoral Act Amendment Bill, and then it was a conference committee. But now the way it is that some members say normally the procedure is you bring the bill, give us 24 hours to consider it, and then we all come to the table before we agree to it. But this case, some say that they brought it the same day, we signed it the same day. Do you think these factors are going to weigh heavily on whether or not this will be assented to by the president?
Well, frankly, I really don't know whether that is what the president will look at, i.e. the manner in which the bill was passed by the House of Reps.
Maybe I should have added,
yes,
in addition to the protestations by members of both political parties this time, not just one political party, both of them, the leading ones, the APC and the PDP.
Well, let me first and foremost situate your question within the legislative powers of the National Assembly.
Yeah.
Under item 56, the National Assembly has exclusive legislative competence in respect of the formation and regulation of political parties. And over the years, since 1999, the National Assembly has been passing laws to regulate the activities of political parties. So really, there's nothing strange in the National Assembly saying that party primaries should be by direct primaries. Even the present Electoral Act has a similar provision, only that it provides that it should be by direct or indirect primaries. But you must conduct primaries. So that is a regulation by the National Assembly. Now, that's just a background I just want to give to show that the National Assembly, they can't do that. They can't say it's only by direct primaries. They can even say it's only by indirect primaries. Now, the internal procedure by which the National Assembly arrives at passing a bill, for me, it's not something that is ordinarily justiciable in the sense that you can't really question it. Yes, once there is disparity between a bill as passed by the Senate and the House of Representatives, they will always set up a conference committee to harmonize it. So that conference committee of both the Senate and the House of Reps, the sole purpose of their meeting is to say, okay, let us see how we can harmonize this bill so that we'll come up with a unified bill for both houses to adopt and pass it. So in respect of this particular issue, yes, they had the conference committee. The conference committee met, and
did they really do much?
Well, they didn't really. They didn't deal with all of it. They just gave some specific provisions.
That was it.
But what I do know is that yes, once a report is presented to both houses, the members certainly they are entitled to have this report to look at it. I really don't think it's their practice to just bring a report the very first time before the members and then they adopt it. But I really don't think that goes to the substance of the point, really, for me, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
For me, the question is the content of the reports. Are they in agreement with it? Are the majority of them what is in the reports?
Okay. Well, for me, I'm not particularly satisfied with the position of the representatives of the political parties and members of the National Assembly on this question that I want to ask you. Because their interests may be different, from that of someone like you who is probably not politically active. Political parties are supposed to be like policy champions, right? They have political ideas or policy ideas for wanting to come into government.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering what the role of a political party is supposed to be when they win seats and occupy offices such as they have in the National Assembly. I'm asking that against the background of the fact that we're hearing of contestations of the position of the National Assembly concerning this direct primary. The National Assembly says direct primary and no other option. But the political parties, the major ones at least, are kicking. At least from all the reports that are available all over the place, they are not completely happy. It's like they are being compelled and boxed into one angle. So I'm wondering, is there a role for the political party, which is the ruling party, in the affairs of the party, of the governance in which they are in charge of? If they are also not in agreement with the position of the National Assembly on this matter, what do you think is going on?
Well, I really think what that throws up is a question of the kind of influence or control the political parties have over their elected members.
Or none.
Maybe they have none, but I really think it also reflects, maybe to some extent, a lack of ideology or, as you say, policy, even within the political parties themselves. Because really, when a political party sponsors a particular candidate, it should ordinarily be a candidate that has keyed into the policies and the philosophies and the ideologies of that party. So that's really why I'm sensing a kind of a disconnect between the political parties and candidates who they sponsored. Every member of the National Assembly there is there on the platform of a political party. So the question, what is the platform of this party really? What are the ideas, what are the ideals that ought to be promoted by their sponsored candidates? So when you see that kind of a disconnect, I think it's something that is quite odd and incongruous, frankly.
All right, let's bring in Mr. Festus Okoye as we go to the Anambra, like you review the scenario there. Mr. Festus Okoye joins us from Awka virtually. Good morning and thank you for joining us on the program today. Well, it's, can we say it's all set and done now? Maybe one part of it, because INEC will still go back and take a look at what transpired, review the processes and see how you can improve. But right away, I'm sure you have feedback from a lot of people concerning the beavers, the performance of the beavers. What went wrong?
Well, good morning. The commission has finished with this particular election. Yes, we had a lot of challenges with the beavers during the first election on the 6th of November this year. But as you can see, when we went back to the to Ihiala local government area for the supplementary election, you can see that there was a lot of improvement in the functionality of the beavers. The implication is that we have control in relation to what is going on, and we have the capacity to address some of those challenges. We are going to go back to the Commission. We are going to sit down with our ICT department and also with some of our consultants to take a second look at the functionality of the beavers and make a determination of what actually went wrong in relation to the 6th November election. Now, you see, the beavers were brought in 3 different consignments, and it seems to us as if the challenge was with only one of the consignments. And I think it's possible it's a software challenge, it's possible it's an updating challenge, and so on. But our engineers went around some of the registration areas on election day and did some updating, and the thing started working really well. And so, but we are going to go back and take a second look at the beavers and remove whatever challenge occurred during that particular period.
Well, another question on that, Mr. Okoye, would be, how do we upscale that? Perhaps it will be good to identify exactly what happened that made that to happen, because there are those who are challenged that if this election were to be on a massive scale, such as the general elections, the beavers, the performance of the beavers on Saturday would have greatly marred the election if it was on a much larger scale and it's not just one state. Because one can suspect, though, that the supplementary election was smooth simply because, I mean, INEC was just able to sift out the ones that were good and working much flawlessly for that one. So if it was on a much larger scale, on a national scale, using the beavers would probably be a major challenge, and it could mar the entire credibility of the whole process. So if it was going to be on a larger scale, how significant a challenge would INEC have to contend with? I mean,
I think we don't have fortune tellers among the national commissioners. What we have are people who look at situations and try to address those situations. We don't normally roll out any of our electronic solutions without doing a test run. When we did a test run of the beavers during the Soto South One State constituency election, we didn't have any serious challenge. Now we rolled out during this election, and there were a few challenges. But when we went back to Ihiala local government, where we had over 323 polling units, we had a very smooth cell, and that was because it seems to us as if our engineers identified what the problem was and decided to fix it. So as we move into the 2023 general election, we are going to have so many by-elections. We are going to also have so many off-season elections, and we assure Nigerians that
we're kind of losing you, but it's understandable. This one is not beaver, so I can assure you it's just the network, poor connection, which can happen sometimes, but we're hoping to get him back. Now, it's still... Can you hear me? Okay, we'll hope, and we'll just correct that in a minute and then get back to him and get his response about some of these things. So we're even going to talk about the fact that it's not the first time INEC is using this beavers. Yes, it's the first time in Anambra State for elections, but they used it previously. And so you'd have thought that, well, the IT persons should have been used to this kind of facility or equipment such that it shouldn't give this kind of hitch as much as it did there. But we'll get him back hopefully soon. And then, but from your impression, from what you heard about how all of these things have been conducted, and legally speaking, do these kind of things, can they be a challenge? Could there be legal hurdles or impediments as a result of the functioning or malfunctioning of this equipment when the elections are over and done with?
Well, from a legal perspective, I think whenever the technology deployed for the electoral process malfunctions like this, it really has serious effect on the election. So that the question the courts or lawyers will be interested in is whether that malfunction has substantially affected the outcome of the election. You know, having regard to the rules that INEC has set out in its guidelines for the Anambra election, that it is either the BVAS is used or there is no election in that particular polling unit where it has failed to function. In other words, there is no backup, there is no plan B. Is BVAS or not? You know, of course, that will have serious impact on the result of the election. If at the end of the day, they don't get these machines to function substantially well in all of the areas where elections ought to have been conducted.
So, is there a can you give us a picture when the electoral law speaks about substantial compliance? And now you even use the same phrase, substantially. So, what kind of scenario can there be for one to have an idea or say that possibly this could be tantamount to not meeting that substantial compliance stance of the law?
Well, the concept of substantial compliance is always situated within the context of the results of the election. Will it substantially affect the results of the election? So, for example, if the number of polling units where the BVAS malfunctioned is such that the margin between the winner and the person who came second can be breached if elections are properly conducted, then it means it has substantially affected the outcome of the election. Furthermore, for example, in, I think it was in Ihiala local government election where they had to suspend the election and the election was repeated on Tuesday, which is yesterday. The reason why they had to do that was that mathematically it was still possible for somebody other than Soludo to emerge as the winner. I use the word mathematically because what the Constitution requires is that the winner in the gubernatorial election should have the highest number of votes and not less than a quarter of the votes.
You don't have to win those local governments.
To win any local government.
Wow.
So you can amass votes from one local government and then make sure you have 25% in not less than 2/3 of the local governments, and then you win. So that is why I'm trying to use this Ihiala as an example. For some reason, they couldn't even deploy any of their materials for the election. But a return couldn't be made because mathematically, from what I saw in the results, it appeared that one of the candidates had in fact scored a quarter, that is 25% of the votes, in not less than 2/3 of the local governments. So all you needed was about 60,000 or more votes in Ihiala, and he would have been the winner.
In other words, when those politicians were saying, look, it's not over for us. Even though we haven't won 11 or 10 local government areas, all we need is just this 60,000.
Yes.
Even if we win one of those, you could win 11, 12 local government, but once we win one, we win the elections.
Exactly.
But the challenge there, you know, would be, given, mathematically speaking, again, to use your words, sir, given that historically, voter turnout has been significantly low.
Oh, yeah, that's correct.
Maybe the word I should, let me use your word, is substantially low. Yes. You know, and undulating around 25% or less over the years. Could anything still have, any miracle still have happened that would have drawn out up to 50% of 198,000 on the registered voters?
You know, the law will not work on that. So far, there is some possibility, no matter how slim it is. It is slim, yes. You look at the history, voter turnout has not really been that very high. Particularly in this Anambra election, voter turnout was so low that, I mean, I don't even think there's any place where you had up to 30% voter turnout, any local government. But then, so far that possibility exists. then INEC did the correct thing in not making a return. You know, because the Constitution does not talk in terms of the number of local governments you have won. You know, you can win a local government with 2 votes. You can win with just 2 votes, more than the next person. So you have won it, but that next person has the requisite 25%. All he needs is to go to a heavily populated local government, ensure there was massive turnout. If that had been done in Ihiala, for example, there was massive turnout, almost, let's say they have about 148,000 registered voters. If, say, 100,000 came out and one party got 80,000 votes, you see, INEC would have to return that party. Notwithstanding that they didn't win. So with 2 local governments, 3 local governments, you can't be the governor of a state.
Why did some lawyers...
The Constitution does not talk in terms of winning any local government. It only talks in terms of scoring the highest number of votes and not less than a quarter of the votes in 2/3 of the local government.
Are you concerned about that voter turnout thing?
Everybody should be concerned about it. Maybe it's well calls for a review of because it's a constitutional provision for us to look at it, because there is nothing in any law, either the Electoral Act or the Constitution, that prescribes a minimum turnout of voters. But there isn't any law that says
why did some lawyers talk about Section 172 for declaration of result? They thought that, well, look,
179.
Sorry, in terms
179. It wasn't clear. You see, when they made reference to Section 179, none of them placed that Section 179 within the context of the results that have been so far announced. They are just looking at it within terms of, Soludo had won 18 local governments.
So
but the Constitution doesn't deal with winning your local government. Yeah. It talks in terms of highest number of votes. You can gather so much votes from one local government. It's possible. There are states that have riverine areas where they don't even have anybody there, and then you have areas where the entire population is concentrated in that place.
All right, so we'll find out what does this mean for the general elections when we return in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Mr. Okoye, I know they talk about electronic transmission of results and voting, very much hugging the headlines, and maybe for some time to come more so if or when the president does assent to that bill that has been passed by the National Assembly. So the thing now is, what kind of impact will the performance of this? I know you use several terms about uploading results and such phraseology. What is INEC going to do perhaps differently when that law is assented to? Is this still going to be the same format of voting or the same equipment or the same systems now that we will have when that law is signed into, when the bill is signed into law?
Yeah, thank you very much. But grant me the indulgence to just respond very, very briefly in relation to the point my learned colleague in the studio was trying to make. Now, if you look at Section 179, subsection 2 of the Constitution, you will understand very, very clearly why the Commission had to go back to Ihiala. Now, Section 179, subsection 2, makes it very clear that before a candidate can be declared as having been duly elected as governor of a state, the candidate must score the highest number of votes cast in the election, and also a quarter of the votes in 2/3 of all the local governments. Now, 2/3. We have a total of 21 local government areas in Anambra State. And so when you are trying to make a determination of the quarter of the votes in 2/3 of these local governments, you do not make that determination on the basis of 20 local governments. You make that particular determination on the basis of 21 local governments. That is the first point. The second point is that if no candidate secures
I'm afraid we lost him again, as you all saw, but hopefully we'll try to get his response before we wrap that segment up. So the question that we expected him to respond to has got to do with this voting process and the voting systems. From the look of things now, he's given us the assurance, I imagine, I try to infer from what he said, that they'll go back, the IT department, look at the processes, what went wrong, and expect to come back better, because they would have had the opportunity of testing whatever they're going to deploy with the by-elections. They have several of them. So can one then say that having seen these elections and the perhaps would-be by-elections notwithstanding, INEC may have to put in measures as opposed to saying no biometric voter accreditation system, no voting? Would that be a reasonable thing to do?
Well, that's what they've done already in this particular election. I know if you remember when they introduced the smart card reader, they had similar challenges with the smart card reader. In fact, I recall that President Jonathan couldn't be accredited easily for a long time. And they also had to suspend, in fact, the general election because of challenges they had with the smart card reader. But over time, they overcame the challenges, and the smart card reader was used for the last general election. There were not much complaints about accreditation failures. I think with regard to these beavers, with time, this is like the first major election they are using it for, the gubernatorial election in Anambra. So they will overcome it, because I honestly believe that the deployment of technology in the electoral process is really very key to ascertaining the transparency of it, because that's always been the biggest problem with Nigerian election. It's never transparent, it doesn't appear to be credible, but the deployment of technology will assure that. When you have easy access to how the election was conducted, you can easily verify it. You can easily verify the results. So for me, the deployment of technology is really...
But then there are those who, my apologies, Chairman, there are those who still contend that the deployment of technology is at the behest or at the whim of INEC. But then there are those who say that the law, the Electoral Act, still has some inhibitions to deployment of technology for voting and transfer of election results, quoting the various form EC8A, EC8B, and all of that, that the election is still largely manual. That's one of the complaints that INEC has come up with. Is there anything the law can do about that?
Well, I think the source of that problem really is from the decisions of the Supreme Court. Ordinarily, the Constitution has given INEC unfettered powers to superintend, manage, and conduct, undertake elections. The National Assembly, so far as the powers of INEC is concerned, is to give them additional powers. It's not to curtail or restrict the powers of INEC. That is the constitutional provision. But unfortunately, decisions of the Supreme Court took a completely different path. That, oh, well, if it's not in the Electoral Act, then you cannot do it. This was the reaction of the Supreme Court to the deployment of a smart card reader, where the Supreme Court said, well, since the smart card readers are only contained in INEC guidelines, you cannot use it as a basis for questioning any election, since it is not in the Electoral Act. So I think even the National Assembly leveraging on that, or let me not use the word leveraging, trying to avoid the problem of those decisions in this proposed Electoral Act has now given INEC the powers unfettered to dictate the procedure from the conduct of any election.
Unless that act, that part has been removed from this, document.
Which part?
The part which says that they still have to enter those results manually on paper.
Well, that part is still there. That basically should be Section 63. That the polling unit results will be. It's even in the present. What is proposed now, the bill.
Which is what we thought that the conference committee would have perhaps addressed before coming up with this.
What this conference committee even approved was subject to the provisions of Section 63. They now, Section 63 deals with how a presiding officer is meant to sort and count and enter it into a form prescribed by INEC, signed by the polling agents, he will give to the police, he will give to agents. So that provision is still intact, which means even if this bill is assented to by the president, we are still going to have a hard copy form of the results from each polling unit. So I suspect is that hard copy result that will be transmitted, will be scanned and transmitted. So they haven't done away with it. There's still a requirement for it.
You know, something is going to give, because when that transparency, when we ramp it up and it's there, entrenched in the system, perhaps we see a lot more improved elections, improved from what just happened. Are we sure? Because that will mean that we may not necessarily have too much tribunals, cases in the courts. But on the latter note, will lawyers feel happy about that?
Well, there are very, very lawyers who will definitely not feel happy about that. But I think this is what we should strive to do. We must strive towards that that standard where election petitions are reduced, if not completely eliminated, because it doesn't even do the system any good. The judicial system itself is put under enormous pressure from election petitions and election-related cases. And I think it is so undesirable that anytime an election is conducted, the next thing you think of is an election petition. People should be able to see that, well, this looks substantially transparent and credible. Let me accept the result of the election. And
okay, we've got Mr. Okoye back, so just in time. So, Mr. Okoye, could you go ahead that if you haven't finished with the point about responding to Section 179, subsection 2, if you want to move on to the next question, which is about what to expect or what you're going to do differently about electronic voting if the law is assented to.
Yes, let me just conclude the point I was making. Now, the point I was making is that a quarter of the votes in 2/3 of the local governments must first of all be determined. Now, what the Constitution says is that if during this first election, none of the candidates is able to secure that requisite threshold, that there should be a second election. And that second election will be between only 2 candidates out of the 18. The first will be the candidate that secured the majority, the highest number of votes in the election. And the second person or the second party will be the party or the candidate that secured the highest number of votes in the highest number of local governments. Now, you cannot measure the highest number of local governments with only 20 local governments when you have a total of 21 local government areas in Anambra State. And that was why it was imperative for us to go back to Ihiala and go and bring that particular election to a conclusive end, since we did not deploy to any of the polling units on election day. Now, the second issue is that with the passage of the electoral amendment bill by both houses of the National Assembly, the law is still, it is still incoherent until the president assents to it. But the moment we get it, what we are going to do
what I want to hear. It keeps going off when it gets to that part. Oh dear. Okay, well, we lost Mr. Okoye, but I think at some point, well, we'll just still try with that one, but we'll have to end for now. Mr. Mukbaro, we do thank you for your time.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Mr. Mukbaro is a senior advocate of Nigeria. But we're going to have another Zoom connection anyways, and it's got to do with Mr. Thomas Wilson Kubase, who is of the Yes We Fit revolutionary movement. So maybe we might just take a moment, sort a couple of things out, and we'll be back with him. Don't go away.
2 steps back. Oh dear. Oh, you want me here? We are grateful. Oh, Lord. Thank you. We are grateful. Oh, Lord. Hallelujah. For all you have done for us. Hallelujah. We are grateful. Midnight. And let me say,
With utmost humility and gratitude to God, I accept the results of the 2021 Anambra governorship election as declared by INEC. And this reflects the supreme will of the Almighty God and an overwhelming sacred mandate of the people. For 12 years since the massive clamor by the people of Anambra for us to serve them, we persevered to this divine moment. This is a divine journey whose time has come. To God be all the glory and adoration. We have a very long list of persons whom God has used to make this moment a reality. In particular, we thank all members of APGA, especially our national leader, His Excellency Sir Willie Madabrochukwu Obiano and his amiable wife, our national chairman, Ozombo Victor Ikoyi and his wife, members of the BOT, members of our NEC, State Exco, and etc., for availing me the opportunity to fly the APGA flag and the cohesive party support. Many thanks go particularly to our able campaign committees at various levels, our first-rate legal team, and all other stakeholders who work tirelessly and informally to see us through. We are grateful to all the stakeholders of the Anambra project, the clergy and the church, traditional rulers, ASATU, labor market, trade and professional unions, youths and women organizations, non-indigenous associations, businessmen and captains of industry, the diaspora community, persons with disability, etc., etc. We thank all our donors, especially the hundreds of thousands of members of the 41 cell funding support groups who, for the past 2 years, put in their sweat and personal funds to propel this project. Never mind that all of you could not vote. The limited number that voted is still representative of the wishes of the people. We are humbled by the massive support of stakeholders and Nigerians across the entire country. Your donations and goodwill are immensely treasured. In particular, I thank my wife, Queen Frances Nonye Soludo, and children, Ozonna, Ifa, Tuchinwa, Ekene, Odoko, and Zikora, for their love and sacrifices. Despite your deep reservations, you still allowed and supported me to step out in the service of our people. As I promised, I will work hard every day, never to disappoint you. At this moment, we must remember, and will continue to remember, all those who died in the course of this movement, especially the 3 policemen who were killed by unknown gunmen during our town hall meeting with youth in my ward.
Former governor of Central Bank, now governor-elect for Anambra State, Professor Chukwuma Soludo. Well, let's move on and then get on. We've got Thomas Wilson, Dr. Thomas Wilson Ikubase, who is of the Yes We Fit Revolutionary Movement. Good morning and thank you for joining us on the program today. So having observed the Anambra elections for some days and now it's conclusive, from the entire, what you glean from the entire exercise, do you think that this gives some sort of hope or despair for perhaps those who may be apolitical to say, well, if the process is a little more improved, we may throw our hat in the ring?
Yes, first let me congratulate the winner, Professor Chukwuma Soludo. I will also congratulate INEC for conducting this election and announcing the result as at when due. That's a whole lot of plus for them, together with the new technology that is being deployed into it. But in terms of the question that you have asked, maybe the outcome and the conduct of the election will give room for more people to want to go into elections in Nigeria. I think we still have a long way to go. Number one, if you look at the outturn of the people that voted in this election, they are very few compared to the population of Anambra State. So that apathy, that fear, that inconvenience, I think INEC should work towards e-voting. Each time we talk about these things, we say, oh, we're not yet there. When are we ever going to get there? Okay? At the point in time where we advocated cadre that they say it's not possible, but we already achieved that. So we should be looking at e-voting, where I could sit in my sitting room without the fear of unknown gunmen, without the fear of violence, and I will just, vote for my candidate and my vote will count. And this idea that we've always had over the years, where we would need to shut down the economy for a whole day, sometimes 2 whole days, and lose millions and billions of naira because of an election. I think it's archaic. We should be looking at a situation where election will be maybe 2, 3, 4 days, and then collations are done on daily basis, like it's done in some developed parts of the world. So having to shut down the economy is a problem we should be looking at. So INEC should work towards that in next year elections. And let me also say this. People have talked about the fact that we have violence, we have fears, we have all sort of things in Nigerian politics. I think we are not looking at the roots. The roots, Chamberlain, is that the people, the Nigerian people, have seen politics as the most lucrative business in Nigeria. It's a business where you put in a couple of millions and you get billions in return. It's actually the most lucrative venture in Nigeria at the moment. So what we need to do to make the political space attractive for the people you are talking about is to make the offices less attractive. How do we do that? 4 points very quickly. Number 1 point is that we must have a situation, impute it into our laws. The National Assemblies can do it. A situation where political office holders earn salaries like civil servants. No bogus allowances. Let them earn salaries. No extraordinary millions. Let them earn salaries in the scale of civil servant. Number 2, we must have a situation in Nigeria where the income and expenditure of government is published on a monthly basis. So we know what comes into each of the states, we know what comes into the federation account and how it is spent. Number 3, Chamberlain, is that we must have special anti-corruption courts that will complete cases of corruption brought before it within 6 months. No unnecessary adjournment. And number 4, persons who are found guilty of corruption of public funds to be sentenced to life imprisonment without an option of fine. Chamberlain and Ayo, if we are able to do these 4 things, we will succeed in attracting the people that will get into the polity of Nigeria and make it a better place. And even that way, our elections will be less violent because people will want to go in to serve. It will be a situation where I will say, boy, come and run for the office of the governor and say, what am I going to do with it? Because you can't go there and steal. You are going there to work. If we do
just on one of the points that you have raised, Dr. Kubese, just a second, one of the issues that you have raised, and I think it tailors into what the question Chamberlain asked you. The propositions that you have made, a number of people would say quite laudable. The question is, who is going to legislate it? So if we do not have people who have such intentions as you are canvassing now in the position to legislate such things, come in now before we get to that position, and then they actually legislate these things and legislate to make public office less attractive. How is it going to be done?
That's a very vital question. Maybe that's why some people are calling for revolution. Well, a revolution not by turning the system upside down, but by getting the people that we have elected, put the heat in their boom boom and get them to do the right thing. You and I cannot make those legislation. It is the people that we voted for at the National Assembly level that will be able to do this. But the way it is, they are so detached from the people. Now look at the Kulaba law that is going on the issue of direct and indirect primary. Everybody knows, without being told, that what we need to make the system work is to have direct primaries. Now, the people in the National Assembly that passed that bill, which is awaiting presidential action, they didn't do it because they necessarily like Nigeria, even though they know that's the right thing. They did it because they have been disenfranchised, and they feel by passing that into law and the people vote, they will be empowered as against the governor imposing persons on them. So whichever way it goes, it's benefiting the people. So it's still the National Assembly. So I think it's time for us, individuals, Nigerians, citizens, the common men, let's call out our lawmakers and tell them these are the things that we need. I think if we do that, we put the heat on them and we'll be able to get things to work. I think we've been too complacent, Ayo. We Nigerians, we are so complacent. Go on social media, we waste time, debate on things that are not necessary. If we do this as a people, I think eventually we will get there.
we agree that this is something that can be done, then the question of mobilizing people to get into that mindset, to that mental frame, begins. You talked about the turnout of voters. To a large extent, people would seem to have lost interest or trust in the process. Hence, the continuous reduction in the number of people who come out to vote, irrespective of whether or not the voter register has been cleaned, as some people are still advocating. Championing that cause of mobilizing people to take the destiny of Nigeria into their hands, especially the young population, that's a task on our hands. Trusting the process enough, trusting the system enough to say, I'm going to go out and vote, come what may, and ensure that my vote counts. How do we begin that process? Or do you think it has begun?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it has begun. The reason why we have the apathy we're experiencing at the moment is because the people feel, what's the point going out to vote in the first place? The roads are bad. Go through Nigerian roads. They are terribly, terribly bad. Insecurity everywhere. Your friend goes into politics and within 6 months he's building a mansion, he's buying SUVs, and you are here suffering, the system is not working. So those who are going to vote, they just believe, well, maybe there could be some miracle along the line. Let's just go there and exercise our franchise. And this is the reason why you find people who go to the polling unit and, some persons come and give them money and they just take what they can get and they vote. And that's why I must commend the people of Anambra State. We saw a couple of videos, which I'm sure you also saw, situations where some persons came to bribe them, give them money, 5,000 naira, I think, and asking them to vote for particular persons. And they said, no, this is the person you want to vote for. I must give kudos to Anambrarians. If you're an Anambrarian, I think you guys deserve a round of applause. So, but the politicians will naturally impoverish the people so that when they come tomorrow and give you peanuts, the people will come out there and vote for them. So it's a long way to go. We still have a long, long way. And that's what we're doing at the Yes We Fit movement, getting the young ones, changing their orientation, imputing into them the concept of nationality, that we can make Nigeria work, but it must start from the grassroots. You and I not taking money to vote, you and I coming out to exercise our franchise and believing that if we do what we should do and discourage those who want to circumvent the system from doing it in our little way, little drops of water ayo eventually will make a mighty ocean.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Thomas Wilson Ikubese, who is of the Yes We Fit Revolutionary Movement.
Thanks for having me.
Let's take a look at some messages that came through from you. Yunusa Mohammed, you sent the very first one talking about the direct primaries, and Yunusa says, 1999 Constitution of Nigeria gives the National Assembly inherent powers to make laws for the conduct of party primaries, party congresses, and party conventions. This power is captured in Section 228, Subsection A, Paragraph B of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. Direct primaries is the best way to go.
Festus says, about the Electoral Act amendment, who is afraid of direct primaries? The passage of direct primaries in our Electoral Act will be a game changer that will bring democracy to the real people. It will also reduce corruption and bring sanity to our politics, as politicians will be forced to meet and know the people they seek to govern. Only weak politicians who believe they can only win by heavily bribing delegates will be afraid of direct primaries. Okay.
Well, Henry Okeke has this one. It says, we are evolving correctly with the passage of the new electoral bill by the National Assembly. This may be the biggest legacy of President Buhari and current National Assembly. INEC should build up from the Anambra election experience.
Valentine says, what will happen next if the president declines from assenting to the amended Electoral Act? Would he die there? What will be the next steps? Well, the thing is, the National Assembly can or may veto it, which one of the members there did say. So it's not expected to die there. That's the thinking of some of them.
He didn't say. The question he is asking is will. So I guess it's back to the National Assembly, as you said. Bernard in this one says, I think the mode of primaries should be for a political party to decide at any given circumstance. What the parliament across party is trying to do is to remove the control of indirect primary from the governors. Indirect primary is for governors, while direct is for stakeholders, which the legislators belong.
Isimi Kaye Tayo says direct primary gives registered members of a party the choice to choose individually. So why are politicians afraid if they've really done well? Big question, Tayo. We'll see how the answers will come in the coming days. But we have to thank you all for watching this morning. I'm Maokbe Ogun Yusuf.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
I'm Chamberlain, sir. Goodbye.